Our session is entitled Think Small. And think small doesn't mean think without ambition. It simply means be creative and think about, in particular, ways to bring play into, make it more available by having it available as close to home as possible, and to have as many different kinds of play spaces as we can, and rather than necessarily thinking about the facility beautiful or the facility you can enter into a competition to win an award, rather thinking about what can we actually provide out there to do the best possible things we can across the way. We have a really interesting panel today, and whereas up to now we've been working largely with the question of why is this important, and then what might we suggest to stakeholders. When we met over lunch, we decided we wanted to bring those together because a lot of times the why and the what support each other, because we can talk about what do we want to do given the why, and how does that illustrate what we're saying in the why, and why what we're suggesting is important is useful if we bring them together. So we're going to go in the order directly to my left, your right. And we'll start with Abigail Golden-Vazquez, who's the Executive Director of the Latinos in Society program at the Aspen Institute. So why and what?
So why think small is important. I see this almost as think inside the box. One of the most outstanding figures that came from this report is that household income is the #1 factor that's going to determine whether kids are going to participate in play or in sport. And so to me, it means actually think within the box. Think about the resources that are around you, even if they are limited, and figure out ways to be able to utilize them, to maximize them under situations of limited resources. And so for me, that means putting ourselves in the shoes of those people who have the biggest challenges. Under-resourced homes are often the parents are overworked. Sometimes they're working 1 and 2 jobs. Childcare is a big issue. So for me, providing after-school opportunities to participate in sport and in academics would be a major help to these families and allow kids to participate. Keeping sport and play close to home. Using sidewalks, the resources that are available. I grew up in New York City. People played handball against the wall. You took a tennis racket and a tennis ball and you played tennis against a wall. Jump rope was one of my favorite friends growing up. So for me, it's about thinking within the box creatively and using the resources that are available to ensure there's participation.
Thank you, Abigail. Next, we'll turn to Darell Hammond, who's CEO and founder of KaBOOM. And for those of you who've had a chance to look in the report, in fact, I think KaBOOM is featured as an example of some of the kinds of creative thinking that we are talking about here. So go ahead and expand on that for us, Darell.
So our insight was we talked to kids, and we said, what do kids want, and where do they go? And the interesting aha moment for us was kids said play happens everywhere, not just at a playground. And for an organization that for 20 years has been building 2,500 playgrounds in low-income communities, there was this aha moment where we said, how do we get people to rethink routine so that we do meet kids where they're at so that they can actually have play happening everywhere, and fundamentally try to get to a behavior change. Our concern, I would say, is that if we want to reach scale and sustainability, programmatic expansion is going to be a hard thing to ripple out. There's cost implications for it. And the reality is that we need fundamentally communal, family, and all the way down to the individual child behavior change, where play becomes the frankly easy choice, and that becomes the norm, and that norm is what ripples out in communities. But it's thinking about, as you said, the assets that we have, not thinking about places to go, but everything being a place, and how is it child and family friendly.
That's great, thanks. Next we have Dev Pathik. He's the founder and CEO of Sports Facilities Advisory, an organization that has been doing a lot with sports facilities in this country, and in fact has done a lot to think creatively and differently about their uses and their management. Dev, all yours.
Well, I think in relation to why, if most of us in the room think about it, we grew up in neighborhoods where we could go out on the street and play. We were allowed to walk to a park. We were allowed to walk to the sports complex. And that has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. kids are not permitted to move about without the tether of their parents. And that changed. We used to go out and play until dark, until mom started yelling when we'd all start to run home for dinner. That has changed so much that now we have kids who have zero access to any sort of sport or recreation asset. And then you overschedule school time and you end up with kids who have no physical education happening during the day. So now we've taken the time away, and the after school time, kids are not able to go and access facilities because of concerns over safety, whether those concerns are real or perceived. So I think that's the why. I think the what is about looking, exactly as we said, looking at what inventory exists within your community. I think the what, in terms of real action steps, is each of us having the opportunity to take this report and share it with people. Totally inspired by Tom and Project Play and the founding partners that have brought this to the table. The report was enlightening for us, and it's shifting the way we're thinking about this. So to be able to socialize this in your community, to be able to gather people around a table to say, let's look at this, and then with those same people, those people who control inventory, the schools, the YMCAs, the Boys and Girls Club, to be able to ask questions about what inventory do we have, what inventory exists, what time do we have. I think that's a practical step that anyone in this room could take, regardless of your position or title, that is a way to use this report, gather people around, and bring the leadership skills that you all and we all possess to our community. I think that's a very practical what. And again, it's looking at the inventory, similar to what's been said.
Thanks, Deb. Next, we'll turn to J.O. Spengler. He's a professor at the University of Florida in tourism, recreation, and sport management. But what isn't in your program is that he's also been involved with Project Play from the outset. And in fact, he and his research center have done a lot of the fundamental research that we've used along the way to help guide the conversations and the roundtables that led up to this report. So J.O. brings a unusual level of expertise and experience into this conversation. So J.O., now that you have something to live up to, take it over.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the word unusual, so that's unusual. I also am going to do something unusual, but I'm obligated to do this as a Florida Gator, so go Gators. But to get to the first issue of why do we need places to play? We need to have places that are affordable, that are safe, and that are accessible. And this is particularly true in communities with children of color and people living in poverty. The research clearly shows us that in those communities and among those demographics that the opportunities and the places are lacking. So we need to really focus on that. And one way that we do that, I've done a good bit of work over the years as a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grantee looking at this issue of shared use, which we've also may have heard called joint use. This refers to a school opening their gates after hours for the community to use that property for free play, or it may refer to a school and other community groups sharing facilities, sharing responsibilities, etc. So one of the things we have tried to do, and we've worked with the American Heart Association, who's made shared use a policy priority, is to help get those doors opened, especially in communities like maybe inner city communities or lower income communities. A school may be the only place where you have where people have to go and to use, and if the doors are closed, then that's it's a shame, right? So how can we get those doors open? So we've looked at barriers and motivators among school administrators and others in communities to see how we can find those and open those doors and get those opportunities for people to find places to play that are accessible, safe, and affordable. Number one barrier, I need to be brief, I think, but number one barrier is, what do you think, among school administrators to opening their doors?
Liability.
Liability, number one barrier. So we think of it sometimes as peeling the layers off an onion. You take away the liability barrier, the perception of fear of liability, and then you work toward those other things like maintenance and staffing, costs, etc. So that's what we've been doing, and I think As to the what, we need stakeholders within communities and the groups and organizations that they're associated with to form partnerships, to provide more opportunities for kids to play, especially in the communities that I mentioned, and also for schools to open their doors and provide those opportunities, all in the context of needs, so based on what the needs are in the community.
Thank you, J.O. And finally, Barbara Tulipane, who is the CEO and president of one of my favorite organizations, the National Recreation Park Association. We know that, in fact, a great deal of what we want to achieve in our communities happens through parks and recreation. And so she gets the final word from the panel in terms of the opening session.
Thank you. What I love about Parks and Recreation is they are sports agnostic. They don't really focus on one sport, they focus on all of them. And the people that work in Park and Recreation departments are trained. There's actually a doctorate in Parks and Recreation. So there is a science behind the work that goes into that. But rather than talk about what the should and the shouldn'ts, I wanted to share with you a recent trip that I had. Last week I was in Texas. And it spoke to me because I was in Austin. And I realized that this whole community is very hip on health, right? So you didn't see people smoking, you don't see plastic bags, it's this whole movement. I mean, everybody was out walking with their dog, and it was just, it would be uncool not to be healthy, right? So one of the things that we do in Park and Recreation is take a look at the community. So I left Austin and I went down to San Antonio for a visit. San Antonio had the highest obesity rate of any city. The mayor at that time, who was Julian Castro, decided to do something about it. And he created what they call FitPass 2.0. I encourage you to look at that. If you go online and look at San Antonio's FitPass 2.0, it's an incredible effort that they did. They got the whole community involved, and it was around the Parks and Rec department. And what they said to parents and to the kids is, we are going to give you points. And we're not going to dictate where you go or what classes you take, but you're going to have this little pass. And you're going to go into the park anytime you want, take any class, everything's free, and you're going to get points. Oh, and by the way, then we're going to have a movie where it's, how they used to have the drive-in movies? But this is a movie where you have to ride your bike, and you're going to get points for that. And then you're going to go to a restaurant, and you're going to order something healthy, and you're going to get points for that. Oh, and then you're going to go to a museum, and you're going to learn all about bodily functions, and you're going to get points for that. So as a kid, I can do this with my family. I can have a family contest, or I can do it individually. And if you get X amount of points, you win something. And I'm talking like a mountain bike. We're talking good prizes. It has transformed that community. You have family and you have kids out there that are active. And guess what? It's all about the partnerships. So you've got the soccer organizations involved, you've got the tennis involved, you've got the hospitals involved. So I would encourage you, when you think about ideas and going back, think about a community-wide effort. And it started with one mayor who got it and said, you know what, I don't want to be on this list.
Thank you, Barb. So we're going to turn it over to you now. I'm Laurence Chalip. I'm the head of the Department of Recreation, Sport, and Tourism in the College of Applied Health Sciences at the University of Illinois. And my role will be to moderate your participation. And since I'm seated to face this way and ignore all you guys, I'm going to stand up so I can see the whole room. And we're going to start out. So if you have a contribution you want to make, a suggestion, an idea, any contribution you want to make at all, raise your hand. We'll get the mic to you, and away we go.
Hi, my name is Asa Firestone, and I run an adventure lodge in Boulder, Colorado. This is actually a follow-up to Barbara's statement. I'm really interested in the idea that we have a massive playground that's free to all of us, which is the parks and the outdoors. And we haven't really gone into how to best utilize that. And I thought that your point about FitPass 2.0 and how San Antonio, of all cities, is utilizing that to their advantage. And I wonder, can we explore how we can do that in more places and how we can utilize the outdoors to promote this idea of free play, to promote fitness, and more play opportunities for youth.
So as a suggestion, we can do that, and the question is, what can we do to make that better? And we want to draw this out as much as possible from the audience, but we'll give Barb, you want to give a quick response?
Yeah, there's a study, and it's not out yet, but one of the things we're finding is just because you have a park, it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to use it, which is weird, right? And so what we've been talking about internally is, okay, what do we do as an industry to help that? And it is having somebody there with a couple of balls and starting the activities. So there's lots of things we can play off of that, but I think it's more than just having that open space. We need to do something with it.
Who's got the mic? Go.
Hi, my name's Ward Bullard. I'm with SAP. And just building off of your question or your point and Barb, your comment, I think the idea that I've been playing with is how do you make it less about perhaps the mayor needing to run this or the Parks and Rec, and how do you actually use crowdsourcing so that it's something that's actually being done by the community. So meetups or Kickstarter type projects where it actually is, driving people to initiate and invite their friends. And actually create very, very simple mechanism by where they announce their intention to go to a park or a playground and to encourage their friends or their circles. So anyway, just as I heard that idea, I was thinking about how do you make it where definitely you get the community buy-in, you need to have the involvement, but you also kind of push it down one level to the actual people that are going to be there and, as you say, initiating the activity.
Great idea.
There has been some work looking at social media for that purpose. But I think one of the things you've added to that is the thought of more crowdsourcing and crowdfunding even. It's a really neat idea.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think you implied it, but when we were talking about thinking small, were we talking about the creative use of small spaces? Because I've been working in India, and it's amazing what they've come up with, what can be achieved on very little space.
Do you want to give us a quick example?
Not really. I knew that question was going to come in. I can beg off at 80, right?
I'm good. My name is Jim Cummings. I'm the founder of a program called Urban Trekkers in Camden, New Jersey. And JO, I work with a lot of the population and the type of community that you speak to. One of the things I'd like to offer as a thought and perhaps a place to really grow from, working in an environment like I do, an old industrial area surrounded by old rivers, urban waterways, we have made a tremendous effort to get young people outdoors. In our old urban areas, there's a lot of vacant lots. Vacant lots are great places to plant butterfly gardens, great places to expose students to nature and the outdoors. I've taken students to Boulder, Colorado, and to the national parks, and those are phenomenal places. We've also discovered in our old urban areas, we have such a richness of natural resources. We take kids out on the rivers. We build our own boats, and students are kind of rediscovering these old waterways and their incredible natural resources in these old urban areas that have little access to. But once you start to discover them and you advocate for them, you can get cities and park departments to start to build boat ramps. And you can get young people that would have never had those kinds of opportunities to discover in their own communities that there's a tremendous resource that gets them outdoors.
Fantastic. You guys over here in the existentially challenged location, don't hesitate to call for the mic.
She's got a mic.
Hi, I'm Pat. I have a nonprofit called Let's Play America, and I'd love if today every single one of us would make a pledge to go back in our community and share something that we learned today, whether it's one of these balls and we invite a kid to go out and play ball. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, one of the programs we did in Calgary, Alberta was a program where we switched the tiles in the schools from plain old tiles to hopscotch in the hallways. And the program was called Don't Walk in the Hallways.
Oh, that's cute.
And it generated over 700 steps a day, added value because kids don't walk to school anymore. the big benefit, other than the physical activity, was the interesting thing that the kids then saw that the adults were valuing movement to the same level as reading and writing and numeracy. So I think that equation of valuing movement to those levels is detected by our children and very much loved, and independent of the activity that it produced.
Cool. Who has the mic next?
I do. My name is Beth Richards, and I've been running around saying shared use in like half the sessions today and things. So it's a great panel that's up there, and I work with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership, and we're actually the Active Places Hub with the American Heart Association and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, working on Voices for Healthy Kids to really get the policy change on shared use happening in states around liability and incentives. And we have a really great panel up there, and I'd like to just ask you in the challenge in reading this, it's great that this play is here and that we've pulled together this information, but what's next? I was walking up the stairs with Ed here and saying, how do we connect this? How do we connect this with all of the parent coaches and whoever said that he had 100,000 emails of all of those parents to start to ask for this and get this happening in their shared use agreements in their school districts?
Laurence,
just a quick, yeah.
If I could, I'll comment. I'll just use an example because I think when we use, for us, we plan and manage and get financed all kinds of sport and recreation assets. And that means when we're in a community, we're doing stakeholder analysis. Just our involvement in Project Play has shifted the way we're thinking about who the stakeholders are. We didn't realize how exclusionary our stakeholder interviewing process was until some of the dialogue that we've now been invited to participate in. I think that's one of the ways that we'll use it practically, and then to provide data that might benefit a community well beyond a single facility that might be part of the vision, but in a larger way. That's a specific way we plan to use it. It's shifting the way we're going to talk about policy and pricing in venues, because we are learning about how exclusionary we have been, not intentionally, but as unintentionally as sort of all of us have been in colluding with these efforts. So I think that there are some ways that each of us can think differently and broaden who we have conversation with. For us, that's one example. We'll change who's invited to participate in the stakeholder dialogue. We'll change the pricing and use policies to make sure that we're looking at the inventory of time in the most creative ways as possible, and still building sustainable models that support our clients' goals. So in terms of what's next, I can tell you that's what's next for us, is a significant shift. And then the other is we were having a conversation, people need to see what's possible. When you ask kids what they want, if you say, do you want a piece of pizza? The answer is yes. But if you put a menu out in front of them and you say, here are all of the options, that answer is dramatically different. So Jason and I were talking earlier today about how our stakeholder process and the surveys that go out and everything, they don't visually tell people what's possible right now. They're so narrow in their request. So that's an example of something that we're going to practically do that is next, if you will, that I think can make a difference in how we're listening to communities, and will certainly shift how we think about new venues in those communities.
And if I could just add to that, I think it's one of the things I think we're all guilty of is we all talk to each other, and we have to stop that, right? And so we have to talk with the business community, we have to talk with elected officials, we have to talk with people that are not in this room, and what is it that's going to turn them on? I was blown away. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's actually the Chamber of Commerce that is leading their health initiatives. That was new for me. I had never thought of the Chamber of Commerce. And why are these businesses trying to do that? Well, they're smart enough to know that they want to attract the educated white-collar people, and those people are attracted to cities that are healthy. And so there's a business perspective that they're looking, that lens that they're looking through it. So I would say, partner out, go out to other people that are not like-minded and talk to them.
If I could add also, since we're talking about different stakeholders, one of the things in the Project Play report that surprised me the most as a Latina was that Latina participation is absolutely at the very bottom rung. So you have low African American, low Latino, and then lowest is Latina. So we really have to do something to change that across the board. And that's why I talked about low income, because usually that means, in most cases, not all, African American and Latino. And so I think we need to bring those groups in and start figuring out why this is not happening. To me, it's a surprise. As a Puerto Rican, I grew up playing basketball. We were very athletic. We did not have money. We were poor, but we did that. And I can see how in a lot of other communities that may not be the case. I think there's a difference between first, second, and third generation. So we need to start looking at these differences and at the different stakeholders and have different messaging for all of those groups and think about communicating in Spanish and English. Latinos don't only speak Spanish, we also speak English, but so both. So I just wanted to add that because I think it's critical. And as this group is growing, it's going to be 30% of our population. It's critical that it's healthy and it can participate and be an active part of society.
And I think, you think about cities are the government of last resort. And we have federal policy, we have state policy, but mayors actually got to pick up the trash, they've got to deliver on services, or they don't get reelected. And what's happening, we're finding in cities, is that there's this real debate around what's the competitive advantage of our city versus another city. Yep. And how do we not just attract the creative class, but once they start to have kids and families, how do we retain them? So you have Seattle that has one of the lowest concentrations of kids in the urban core. Now the public school system, because of parents moving down there, are actually starting to bid on a piece of property to potentially build a school downtown because residents want to stay there, or they're telling them they'll leave, and when they leave, the tax base goes with them. So I think we have to start thinking about our measure of unit as being cities, but what we can't be forced into is, like biking and walking, end up with benefiting kids who can benefit from it most last. Washington, D.C. has 71 miles of bike lanes, none in Anacostia. Anacostia has the largest number of low-income, free and reduced kids on lunch and the highest percentage of kids living in the city. And so if we want kids biking, we may need to actually put it where the most kids are at and deal with some of the other consequences. And I really think we need to take an equity screen on some of these things first and be intentional about it, not last, and we'll get around to it maybe someday.
Right, and I think we just don't know enough, too, what's going on in communities. What facilities are available? When are they open? Where are they located? We need that information to help us make better decisions about sharing facilities.
And just as a final response, Project Play doesn't end here. It launches its next phase here, and there's more happening. And also, we have initiatives now rolling out at the grassroots level through the states. Illinois having been the first cab off the rank, but several other states are now following suit. And so that'll be kind of the bottom-up element to this approach. So there's a lot more going to be happening over the next couple of years, if it goes the way we expect it to.
We're doing a lot more. We have through this task force, an equity task force on active transportation, and a national task force on shared use. So new materials in Spanish for how someone can go talk to their principal and get a shared use agreement and in those communities. So I'm glad the conversation will continue. Thank you.
Good. And actions as well. Do we have time for, how many more questions do you think we have time for at this point?
Probably 3 more.
2 more? 3. Okay, so who wants to go next? We have the mic over here.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Sealander from Whistle Sports. And I know when we grew up, we were in our backyards thinking that we would someday maybe get a chance to be pro baseball stars, right? So the wind up the pitch, the last inning, my sister very much wanted to be Mary Lou Retton, right? So she'd watch her, and that helped drive her. And we found, though, there's this entirely new generation of digital all-stars that aren't necessarily team sport driven. So Indy Cowie, that's one of our folks downstairs, right? It's her sneakers, and a ball, and she's got 500,000 fans and followers. We got these people in Dude Perfect. It's 5 guys, 1 basketball. They got 11 million views on a single video. Or Brody Smith, who has a Frisbee. Brody and a Frisbee. 5 million loops on Vine in 24 hours. So there's a whole new generation of digital sports stars that can connect with these kids who may not have a whole field. They only have a pair of sneakers and a ball. And to be able to say, you with a phone or a small camera can become very much a famous sports personality at 14, 15 years old. And so get up and get moving and go do it could be a really powerful message. It's just a question of how do we then connect so many people to these new generation of all-stars? Because 1 Frisbee and 5 million views, 1 pair of cleats downstairs and 500,000 in 24 hours.
And I'll tell you the flip side of that was last week I heard from Safe Routes to Schools a photo. And the photo was of 5 kids, 2 on bicycles and 3 standing there with basketballs underneath their arms. And what the context of this photo was, it was in Ferguson, Missouri. And it was one street over from where all the rioting was taking place. And these 10, 11, and 12-year-old 5 guys were simply trying to find a place to escape everything else that was happening in their community and couldn't find a basketball court. Yes.
Hi, going back to the issue of demographics and knowing your community, I'm with a grant-making organization in Alexandria, Virginia, across the river. And part of a local citizens initiative with the city, we did a study in 2012 called actually Project Play. And it did an inventory of all of our play spaces in Alexandria. And we discovered that, first of all, demographically, we have our population of children under 5 has like triple the population growth rate compared with the rest of our population, higher than Virginia as a state and as the national average. We also looked at a lot of the greatest need is in that age group, and the highest concentration of kids live in Arlandria or the West End, which has the highest concentration of at-risk children. So we're focusing on putting in play spaces in those areas, and it's a pretty powerful tool when you have a document like that or a plan like that. It's a lot easier to make resource allocation decisions. So I would encourage, and the city of Alexandria has been amazing to work with.
Can I add to that? One of the things that we are working on is the what-if models, right? And so we are using GIS and trying to map all of the parks in the United States. And I won't bore you with all the details, but that's a challenge unto itself. And we can overlay demographics from the U.S. Census Bureau. So we can look at obesity rates, and we can put a park in there and say, okay, if we put a park here and we do this and that, what would the obesity rate, what would happen here, or what would happen to asthma? So we're getting much better about that. But one of the things that always surprises me is, and I heard it all day today about the importance of it, and everybody's, yes, we have to have places for our kids to play. And yet we have legislation right now that's pending in Congress that is the only federal dollars that will go to local parks. And the reality is it probably won't get reauthorized. And that just blows my mind. Because here, all of us are saying, oh yes, we gotta have parks, and yet here we go. We have no support on Capitol Hill for that.
Ed Foster Simeon, U.S. Soccer Foundation. I want to go back to the stakeholder question and and particularly as it relates to underserved urban communities. I was talking to my colleague James earlier, and this question of, engaging stakeholders in a way that they can engage. We're talking about existing tax policy, tax credit policy for building infrastructure in underserved communities where the real problem is resources. There are no resources, and unless someone is going to bring those in, you have to incentivize that. And I'm not sure that we think enough about those kinds of business implications that would create a win-win for various people. When I first moved to Northern Virginia in the suburbs, I learned about proffers. When developers wanted to build something, they had to do something else that the county wanted. In middle-class communities, they do that all the time. It seems time that we think about how to leverage that in underserved communities where resources are limited.
I'll comment. We're working on a project right now in North Carolina that is going to use new market tax credits, which requires that project to be in a redevelopment zone. It's in a blighted downtown that is desperately in need of some sort of spark. If you give up on that downtown, you may as well give up on the name of this city. And it's exactly right. And I don't want to, we've got a roundtable that we're going to host in September around these kinds of issues because, to your point, we need a spectrum of finance and funding systems and proven models that cities and counties can look at. And it's especially important now that we're going to watch another round of sort of defunding of these kinds of public infrastructure. So I think you're absolutely right. And the awareness and the opportunity to educate ourselves around finance has never been more important than right now. Never.
And that being a great place to pause. And as you know, in all of our sessions, we've had an artist working with what's going on, trying to capture some of the conversations. So we'll turn it over to you to share with us, Jim, the what you've captured for us.
Great. Thank you. It's been, like all the other programs, has been great listening to the discussion and your ideas and your inputs, and I know there's going to be more, that we're just scratching the surface. I like this. The play happens everywhere, and it's not. I live in the suburbs of Washington. It's Montgomery County, and it's soccer complexes and the latest state of the art, this, that, and the other. We're really we could just be concentrating on everywhere and encouraging play. You don't need the latest and greatest to get out and be active and involved. Looking at the inventory, this whole idea of the schools, the community centers that have the basketball courts and the tennis courts that just need to get those doors open. They have the problems. There's the pushback, liability, maintenance costs, what have you, but it's doable. Making use of existing spaces in the urban areas, and I love this, the great outdoors. We have a massive playground. Well, that was a great quote. This whole idea of how, it's not just let's get people out there playing. It's a community. It's a holistic approach in the community. This pit pass idea with San Antonio and bringing together so many resources that you wouldn't think of first off, getting them involved. Kind of looking inward for a minute and realizing, okay, we need to broaden the conversation, bring in other stakeholders, business communities, specifically Latinos was mentioned, but I'm sure there's plenty of other groups that are not represented or minimally represented. And then once we bring them in, talk to them and listen to them, and then think about how you can adjust the message to those different communities. Go home and play. I like that one. And then this whole use of digital technology, not only in bringing groups together and sharing resources, the meetups, the kickstarts, the social media, the crowdsourcing, but also as a tool of awareness. Just something as simple as that viral video from the Ferguson about kids don't have a place to play, and the need to identify, getting back to the what's the inventory that we have, what's the spaces, not only the vacant lots in Camden or the waterfront that's underused, but the parks that may need to be revitalized or the school spaces. Put the DC native and resident. Put the bike lanes that we all like to talk about. Put them where people need them, where they actually can use them. And I like the idea of encouraging the kids and members of the community to use those digital tools to come up with their own games. Really, this whole idea of the digital challenges, the sports stars, and it sounds silly, but it's actually you've got somebody having fun, playing, and being active. There's probably more, but I think that's the highlight.
Actually, all of these are posted. You've probably seen them displayed downstairs, so please don't hesitate. All yours, Risa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us all afternoon. We're really excited. We have a bit more, but before we get to this afternoon's plenary sessions and even more exciting announcements, I'm thrilled to introduce Aaron Smith from U.S. Lacrosse with you. If you've been in other sessions today, which all of you hopefully have, you know that at the end of each session, we have some organizations who are already making commitments to ways that they are activating off of the Project Play Report, Sport for All, Play for Life, a playbook to get every kid in the game. And so Aaron is here to tell us a little bit about what U.S. Lacrosse is doing. Also worth noting that as you're inspired today, we encourage you to submit what your play is at bit.ly.com/ourplay. It's in your program. It'll be on some screens later this afternoon. You can always reach out to us and we can send you that link for that digital form to share with us what your action is. How are you going to help make Project Play a reality in your own communities? But here's Aaron first.
Thanks. It's always tough being on late afternoon, right? Everybody awake. So our play actually revolves around the train all coaches. If you're kind of aware of team sports and participation, lacrosse has been the fastest growing team sport over the last decade in the United States, and especially at the youth level. The number of kids who want to play lacrosse versus the number of parents who had the experience to participate in lacrosse as a child or as they got older is far, their kids are outpacing their experience with the sport. We've only had a national standardized certification and training program for coaches in basically for a decade, unlike USA Hockey, which has had an 80-year-old standardized training program. So that was a big jump for the organization as US Lacrosse. But what we've realized in the last couple years is that our level 1 training, while we're very proud of it and is very developmentally appropriate and really grounds coaches, it's a 6-hour day and it's long, and we give you the water hose of information and everything you need to know to work with those little munchkins, from fundamentals of communicating with those kids all the way through to how to cradle and how to throw and how to shoot and how to run a age-appropriate play. And those poor parents who just want to get out on the field and say, be with their kid for a couple hours, come out of there with these kind of spirals in their eyes. So what we've committed to this past, in the last couple months, is rolling out a lower level version of our in-person training called Learn to Play, which is a very accessible training for coaches who have not ever had experience with the sport of lacrosse. It's way more accessible, way less intimidating than our standard level 1 coaching curriculum. We also had the happy accident at one of our pilots. A couple of the parents brought their kids along thinking it was a player clinic, and they had a blast. So the kids learned how to quote unquote coach alongside with mom or dad, who's really going to be out there on the field teaching them what to do this spring. So our goal is we have a network of 70 chapters that US Lacrosse supports through our membership dues each year. And we're developing the curriculum and hope that in 2016 we're able to roll out one of these clinics in each of the chapters. Again, they receive funding from the national dues. And we figure if each chapter is able to run one training clinic, and it even draws 20 parent volunteer coaches, and each of those 20 parent volunteer coaches then impacts a child who's on a team with 20 other children, that, I'm really bad with math, so I had to write it down, that we're hoping that by spring of 2017, we should have 28,000 more kids having a trained coach on the field versus just someone who was able to commit to that whole 6-hour day. Now they've got somebody who's had that baseline training and hopefully will, again, have that better experience. So that's our play, to try to train all coaches, not just coaches who have the time and the ability to spend a full day and get the full coaching certification training. So.
Well done. Before we break, I'd just like to thank you guys for being such a great audience, especially late in the day. There's a whole bunch of good ideas came forward, and I know I got a lot of new thoughts out of it. And I also want to thank the panel, which has been just an exceptional panel with all that they've contributed. So thanks to everybody who made this such a good session. Thank you.